Hi and welcome to this session of Caddsman Architect Business Development Group. In this session we're going to go through importing a DWG survey file and then stylizing it to match into your drawing style and the weights, the text size and each of the different aspects of the drawings to work with the way that you want it to look in your drawings. So I hope that you'll stick with me. It's a fairly long session. We're going to add timestamps into the description below. So go to the description below the video, hit the little down arrow, and that'll allow you to jump back through your session times and pick up on those things that you want to revisit. Trust that it's useful to you, and we'll get into it. So the first part about importing that's probably worth talking about is the actual extra files in Caddsman. So if you go to your architectural data and then go to down, you'll find, actually I've got a few old ones in here that I don't need. You'll find these set of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 files. What these are is effectively they're just text files, and each of them are interacted with the import function. And you can actually go into each of these files and manually change them to your suiting. You can also make different versions of them, change which one you're using when you're importing. I tend to not do that, but I've got a few things that are set in them, and I'll just quickly take you through and show you what they are. If you open them up in Notepad, the first one is character map. And what this does is it basically takes the Unicode for special characters and tells it what to turn them into if you're using a Caddsman font. So for instance, like a diameter sign, a power of 2, a power of 3, plus minus, degree symbols, square meters. They're all commonly used by surveyors. And so what you can do here is you can put in the Unicode for it and which character to use in the Caddsman font. I'm actually I use a font that I've called Stencil, which is a version of Mill Standard. And what I've actually done is I've actually put in some special characters into that. So for instance, this little character there, which is just above the tab key, is actually a degree symbol in my version of the font. And the tilde, whatever that wiggly little line symbol's called, I've changed that to be to a power of 2, so I can have like square meters. And so you can put in whatever special characters that might be used and what font that you're going to change. You just save it back into the same name. Any of these ones which start with a hash, hash makes it a comment, so they don't actually get used. So if you wanted to use any of the ones that are there that already have a hash in front of them, all you have to do is delete the hash and that'll activate that particular Unicode to that character. If you are going, what the hang is the Unicode for this particular character, you can actually copy it out of the text line in the DWG, go to Google and go and paste and just go Unicode for and paste the character in, and Google will very quickly give you the answer for what this line there should actually read for whatever the special character is. So that's the character maps. You've got a color convert. Very simply, it takes color 1 in AutoCAD, makes it whatever color you want it to be in Caddsman, and then also assigns a weight to it. So if your surveyor's commonly using blue as a 0.5 pen and white as a 0.25, you can just find out which color that is, and just fill in this table to change it to whatever weights you want. I sort of run out at 86, and I use 0.20 for most of them. So that's that one. Fonts, same deal. You can actually automatically get it to change from whatever the font name is in the DWG to whatever the font name is in Caddsman, and it will convert. Layers, AutoCAD layer name, AutoCAD layer number, Caddsman layer number, Caddsman layer name, and you can just put in whatever you want there. They're separated by tabs, so you can convert that if you want to. I don't, clearly. And types, you can actually use AutoCAD line types and convert them into particular Caddsman line types automatically. For instance, if your surveyor uses a fence line, you can put in a set number for that, or you can manually do it on the way through. So as you can see, I've got some there, and when we go through, you'll see that I haven't got all of them. So what we're going to do is we're going to go File, Open, under the arrow, DWG. We're going to go to my sample and Land Surveyor, and I've actually done two different versions of the exact same file here. All I've done is opened the surveyor's file and saved it to a version 2000 AutoCAD drawing. Can't import anything that's later than 2000. Sometimes when you have a surveyor using certain systems, you'll find that they have stuff that's automated and creates all sorts of fancy stuff, and Caddsman can then struggle to bring some of those special items in. If you actually go back to an even earlier version, you can actually tend to find that a version 13 DWG saves out, gets rid of all those fancy things that the surveyor software might be using, simplifies it and makes it easy to be able to bring it in. So if you ever get stuck, that's one of the ways to go. Sometimes it's a matter of actually what's the right word for it? Exploding those items within the DWG, but very, very rarely do they click in as a real issue. So the reason why I've got two different versions here is the surveyor that I use uses a strange version of Times New Roman for his font, which I don't actually have. And so I'm just going to bring that in and show you that the font comes in and it's like it's completely disappeared. And then I've done a different version where I can bring it in, where I've actually changed the font in the DWG before I've brought it in. So we'll just go File, Open, DWG. Probably helps if I just do it rather than get myself confused with my talking. This is the one with the font that will look like it's missing. Right, so in here, you've got the file that you've selected, where you're saving to. I always just leave it in the same place. Which view is it going to open in, whether it will open in paper space or model space. I always use model space. The units of which the DWG file uses. I've found that every surveyor I've ever imported stuff from always uses 1 unit equals 1 metre. So if you set metres here, that'll then help bring that across at the right proportions. If you have it set to millimetres, you'll find that you end up having to scale stuff. So much easier if you just change it here. And I just leave this as automatically packed file, which just cleans things up when you're done. Now, these conversion files that we just went through before. So whether you use it, you can actually just untick it and not use it at all, or you can tick it and then you can have different versions of those CVT files for each of the different surveyors that you might be bringing in things from, and you can actually select which CVT file you're using, and you can even select that you review it on the way through, and I'm not going to do any of that. Under advanced, you'll find that there's things that you can exclude on the way through. The only thing I ever exclude is the blank text. But yeah, you could exclude dimensions if you didn't want them, or hatches if you didn't want them, etc. So we just do that. Give it a second or two while it thinks about it. Now this one, it says survey fence is a line style that is used in the DWG file, which I haven't got in the conversion table. I'll often just pick a number like 11 or 4 or something like that. It just makes it something other than a solid line, just to make it so you can pick it out easy later. You just put in what line type you want and hit add and go OK. If there's another one, it'll ask you again, add, OK, and it'll ask again. In this one, there's quite a number. You can just go preset all, go I don't care, it's just going to set them all to 0. It takes a few seconds to think about what it's doing. You'll see down here where it says Times New Roman TUR, that it doesn't know what that is. I don't know what that is. I haven't been able to find a replacement for it. So when it actually does pop up, you'll find that there's no fonts there at all, but they are actually there, and I'll show you how to deal with that. So looks like nothing's happened. You'll see that that's my survey down here, this little tiny blue square. And if you hit end, you go back to this same view. What's going on there is not all entities are visible. So I've gone to view and visible entities, and all your points and free points are off. So I've just turned those on, or you can just turn all on by hitting that. And what you'll find is that there's some stray points way up here. And if you zoom in, they are just frivolous stray points. If we delete that, hit end, oh look, there's a whole lot more. I don't know why, but my surveyor always seems to have stray points all over the place. Now when I hit end, we're now down to what we can actually see as the survey, and you'll see that his title block's empty, there's no text anywhere. Very easy to fix. You just go to the text menu up the top, annotate, text change, select a font. In this case, we'll actually go to, I go to down here to the Times New Roman that I do have. It'll be probably the closest to what the original survey was. I select all, and there's all the fonts there. So the problem that you'll find is a lot of the surveyors, they're working in 2D, but their data is somewhat in 3D. So if you actually jump to an ISO view, you'll find that it's a fat mess like this. And that actually makes it quite difficult if you're trying to, say, snap to this line or figure out what this line is here, and you're looking at it in 2D, it becomes very difficult to work with, and you're going, why is these lines so hard to deal with? That's why, is because they're not 2D. A really easy way to fix that problem is, first up, make sure that your DTM, so if we turn on all layers, my surveyor also embeds a DTM as well, just to make it even more confusing. So he's got 3D data, he's got 2D data, he's got things that are stray from snapping from one to the other, and he's not aware of any of that because he's just working in straight 2D AutoCAD. So we'll just turn the DTM back off because I don't want to flatten that. And using the scale tool, group scale, you can actually go 0 copies. We want 1 in the X, 1 in the Y, and 0 in the Z. Effectively, scale is a multiplier, so multiplying anything by 0 is 0. So that'll make all your Z values 0 and flattens out all the three-dimensional, all the stray data that he's got all over the place. The only thing it hasn't flattened is you'll see that there's a whole bunch of text is standing up and all over the place. That is a issue that is with true type fonts. True type fonts are always square to the view. So as we go around, they swish and swash all over the place. So what I normally do to fix that is I don't normally use true type fonts. I just come in here, make sure that we're on Caddsman, pick my font that I want to use, and just select all, and it changes it to a Caddsman font. But what I didn't do is I need to set to drawing no. So drawing is just square to, is flat to view, and that then makes it flat to the DTM, or flat to the drawing. Now we've got something that's a lot more functional and usable as a 2D drawing. I will just now go back to view, turn off the visible, turn off my points, and that actually looks like a survey. If we go to top view, we've got something that's quite reasonable. I'm just going to pull up something here on my other screen. So I've just been winging it a little bit to now. I sent out a copy of a macro that we're using, which actually takes you step by step through each of these things. The macro just does them all automatically for us. There's real value in me taking you through each step individually, so that you can actually then go to the macro and make it what's going to work with you guys. So the first thing that we're going to fix up is, I'm just going to turn off the visibility. So around the trees at the moment, you can see the extents of the block or the symbol. We're just going to turn that off as well. That gives us a little bit clearer view. Now, something I don't like about my surveyor's trees is that these are made up of a whole lot of little tiny lines, and there's no indication where the center of the tree is unless he's specifically picked it up, and then he'll actually put in a trunk and a trunk diameter. Just feels very vague, and you know, is that tree actually in the nature strip? Of course it is, but there's a really easy way to actually deal with that, and that is to substitute the tree that I like in for his tree. We can do that really easily through Link, and go to Link Manager, go to Trees and go to Edit. It selects all the trees. I can then select from the file and
landscape.
Yeah, landscape and trees, and I have got a tree called Moxon, existing tree Moxon, which is the surveyor, and just go OK, and it'll actually substitute my tree in instead of his. And you can do that with any of their symbols. So if you don't like what they're using for their gas meter, or you don't like anything, you can just straight up swap them over. The easiest way to do that is to actually open one of these symbols from them, which you can do. Here's his water meter, for instance. Let's say I hate the way he does his water meter. I can just select it, right click, and go edit the original symbol. And then I just go save save as, save it off into my own DAB for later reference, change it however I please, and the scaling and the way he's actually using it. So for instance, with the trees, I think his tree is drawn as 1 unit in size. So it's a standard 1 metre tree, and he scales them up and down for different size trees. So having opened his symbol originally and then redrawn his tree how I like it and saving it off, I can then just swap it in anytime I like. So that's a handy little way of getting around stylising it the way you like it. So now I've put a little cross in there, I've made them green trees, and I've actually made them curves. So if I was to actually unpack that to a set and change it to a line style of 1, perhaps of 10, that's 1. Did I pick a particularly small tree? I actually haven't taken to dashing trees for quite a while. The original reason I did it was so when you change it to a dashed line, you can actually see that the tree is dashed. We've taken to just changing them to red for when they're trees that are being demolished. So we've got our stuff almost ready to go to the next step. One of the things that I'm looking at and I'm going, I don't really like, is the font. And the font is actually wider than it is high. So I want to scale the fonts so that they're more square. Very quickly, I can just go grab my calculator. Where is it? Calculator would come up. Doesn't seem to want to play ball with me. I know what the figure is anyway. So 250 out of 285 is a 0.877. I can go to, can't scale fonts using the standard scale tool, but if I go to annotation and I go to this little drop down at the end of edit, there is a scale function, which means I can actually scale the height or the width of my font. I'm going to scale the width of it to 0.88. 0.877, and that squares the font up and will make it pretty close to 250 by 250. I'm just going to undo that and do that again, which is right, this little drop down arrow, scale 0.8, let's go 0.88 and actually do it to all fonts right across the whole thing by doing a select all, which is a Control A, or I've got it over here as a select all as well as an icon. Don't know whether you've got that, whether that's one of my modifications. The other thing I don't like is the fact that he's used lowercase, uppercase. Really quickly, I can just go text change and go, I actually want to change the case to uppercase and select all. And now I've got uppercase fonts right across the board. That's about all that I do about fixing the font, except for, so what I'll show you here is he's using the 250 high font and he's using scaled fonts, which means if I actually change from a 1 to 100 plot scale to a 1 to 200, the font stays exactly the same size in relation to the drawing, which is convenient because it doesn't confuse things, but often that'll end up with your font being really tiny or overly large on your drawings when you're going from one scale to the other. One option is to actually pick a reasonable size that's halfway between the two, which you can do if you're going 1 to 200 versus 1 to 100. But if you're going 1 to 100 to 1 to 500, you're probably going to be really struggling to get something that's legible in both. So what we do is we actually go to text change and change to fixed. So plot size is fixed. And go OK, and if we select all all the font becomes crazy big. But of course, we can just go back to scale and we can go 0.01, 0.01, select all, and that then means that at 1 to 200, that font there is going to be 2.5 high, and at 1 to 100, it's still going to be 2.5 mil high on the print, smaller, more convenient for the drawing. So that's probably a bit large, 2.5. I don't use fonts that big. I'd actually use probably 1.5 for that sort of point. So again, we just scale it and we just see if I can get my crazy calculator to come up. I think it's hiding. There it is. It's hiding behind Zoom. So if I go 1.5 out of 2.5, it's a 0.6. So I can just go scale and do a final scaling of my font to 0.6. And at that point, it's appropriately sized from my 1 to 100. And if I change over to a 1 to 200, it's actually not too badly sized. It's not clashing with everything. And so, but it will be exactly the same size font on the final drawing, so it will be legible in both scales. The other thing that you'll find about fonts is that they'll actually be weighted as weight 0 because they were a true type font. They didn't have weight, so we want to deal with the weighting of fonts. We want to deal with anything that's weighted 0. We want to give it some sort of a weight so that it's going to be functional. And the easiest way to do that is just to do a group scale, give it a weight, give it a 0.2 weight, and go OK, and then go to inline masking. And I'm going to do a weight mask. Anything that's weighted 0, I've just changed it to a plus. And then I can go select all, and everything that is weighted 0 will now be weighted 0.2. The final thing that you'd want to look at is, say, some of these larger bits of font. There, you might want to just quickly click those over to a 0.35. And depending on what they look like when you go from 1 to 200 to 1 to 100, sometimes you'll find they get too close to the boundary, something like that. So what I'll do is I'll actually pick what's below the boundary, nudge it, actually change my justification. So my vertical justification in this case to top. Then I can move it up near the line in my 1 to 200. And then when I change to my 1 to 100, it'll be the same off the line. So that just makes it, obviously for this one, I want to just make sure that that is justified bottom. This one, I want justified, so the horizontal justification is horizontal to the text line. The top, center and bottom is in relation to the top of the text, the middle of the text or the bottom of the text. So this one I'd go bottom and I'd probably make him centered, whack him in the appropriate spot. And I would do the same here. I'd go top, center, move him into position. And now I've got the ability to switch between my 1 to 200 and they're not clashing with the boundary lines, 1 to 100, and they're not crazy distances away from the property. Next up, we've dealt with our fonts.
Dimensions.
Dimensions would be my next thing to deal with, yeah. So if you have a look, That's not an acceptable dimension. What I do there is I've actually got some preset dimension types that I've got for setbacks. So I just call those up and I'll put in a setback dimension like so. And then all I need to do, so if you want to, you can actually just have that as a symbol that you insert, or a macro that you've written to set your settings the right way. And then you just go dimension properties, copy, select the one of how you like it, go OK, and select all.
You went properties, not change dimension.
I did too. Change dimension, copy, select the dimension, go OK, select the suffix, paste, and that then makes all the dimensions correct.
So when you change the scale now, Pete, do the arrows change as well?
So yeah, they do. So they're a fixed size as well. So they appropriately look right given the scale of the drawing. Rightio. Back to my little list. Now, colours. This is probably where you decide, okay, how am I going to use this survey in my drawing? Am I going to bring it in as a link, or am I going to reference it? And if I bring it in as a link, I can actually override the colours and make all of it one colour as a link. If I'm referencing it, I don't have that ability to do an override colour. So I want to get my colours right here, the way I want them to appear in my drawing. So what I typically do is I bring the survey in mostly in what's the best colour? It's a mild blue colour. It's this colour here. It just toned down, fairly inert, but it's separated out into a slightly blue colour. You can really see what's the survey versus your drawings. Neat way of doing it. So what I would do here is I'd get rid of the boundary. I would actually go, what am I going to do with this title block? I'm going to chuck that out of the way for the moment and get rid of that. I'd say that's pretty much what I want to bring in. And then if actually what I'll do is I'll just save this as it is, and I'll show you what I actually would do with the two different options. So save that. I would actually go File, Open. I'm going to the actual project this relates to. I haven't created a DAB for it yet, so I'm actually going to. The way I start most of my projects is I just open my template, but I don't actually have it as a template. I just open it as a DAB that I've chucked in a folder called templates. So under symbols, templates, that's the template I'm going to use, and open. Go File, Save As, and I'm going to save that into the particular project. Projects. Project. I keep keep a model called projects, which has all the views as they are. I just sort of set that aside. So if I'm wanting to create more models with all the same setup, all the same views, I just go back to the project of that current file and I just do a save as. So in this case, I'm just going to go save as. I'm going to go name it survey. Actually, I'm going to go back to my survey, grab hold of my survey, copy it using the Control-C, jump over to my current project, go Control-V, pop it in, and then place this somewhere that makes some sort of sense. Now, because my views elevations are set up looking from my CPL, I'm actually going to just move it up somewhere above, or I could even move it so that the corner of my site actually lines up with absolute 0, 0, 0, and pop it in like so. What I normally tell my surveyor is which line of the site that I actually want to be square to the drawing, so that north is not directly straight up when he gives it to me. But one of the boundaries that I'm going to set everything out from is square to my drawing. If that's not the case, when I get it, I just use a rotate by 3 points, select everything, start it right at that corner, select this corner, turn ortho on and click. The reason why I've got him actually doing it rather than me is that all of his drawings, all his labelling and everything, if it's all out of whack and you rotate it, it all looks a bit strange. If I get him to actually draw his drawing square, it saves me having to rotate a whole lot of text to make it look sensible. So because I actually reference in the this into my actual model that I'm working on, I actually set my visibility and my colours right here. So for instance, if I go on ground floor, I actually don't want to see the existing building. I can actually select all those items and hide them. Here I can do the, so I'm going to do a group change, select my colour, that's my survey colour, okay, I've misfired there somewhere, group change, survey colour, okay, and select all, exclude, layer mask, 11, which is my trees, select all, and that's changed everything except for my trees to the blue colour that I want to use. In this particular view, I still want to get rid of some of this existing building. Often what I'll do is actually change anything that I'm demolishing. I'll change to one of the rare cases that I actually use layers, but I'll change it to layer 50 and colour 10, so that I can really easily see it. Again, colour 10, layer 50. Because I hid some of that stuff before I did that, I can just jump to my first floor, grab it here, and again, layer 50, colour 10. And 50. And if I wanted to, I could easily then go hide and do a color mask of color 10, or do it as a layer mask of layer 50, and get rid of it off the ground floor view and off the first floor view. But it's still there in my 1 to 100 site plan. It's still there in my 1 to 200 site plan. So we're almost there. All we now need is, if I was to draw up a proposed dwelling, I would go back to my project. I would go File, Save As. I'm going to call it Dwelling 1. And I would actually reference, reference file at absolute 000, select my survey and reference my survey in. That's where I then start drawing up my new building. Because it's a reference, I have the ability to actually go reference hide and hide the survey. And if I close and reopen it or do a reference update, it'll pop back in. So it's just gets your survey out of the way temporarily, really quickly, really easily. If I'm going to do a proposed building, let's go quick veneer 250. I would then radio, my building's going to be offset from the side boundary 1500, and I want to come off the front boundary, but I don't want to come wonky, so I would just put in a square line across the front there, and then offset the front of my building my 9 meters, and then work my building out from there. If I decided that I don't want to see my survey in this particular view, but I want to see my survey in my site plan, but not in my floor plan, or in my working drawings floor plan, I can select it. I can right click and go edit reference part and go yes. It'll take me through to the survey on the same view, and I can select all and go, I don't want to see it in this view. Hit save. I'm back to my dwelling. Do an update. My reference is out of the way. And then I can dimension up my floor plan here. But if I jump back to my town planning ground floor plan, there is my building around it, my site plan at 1 to 200. And it's all working really well together. In this case, I could either jump into my site 200 and say, I don't want to see the demo, or if I want to, I can just switch it off with my layer switching. The alternative option that I have, instead of referencing, is linking. Static link. So if I go reference, remove, I can select that and remove it. It's gone. And up here, I would go, instead of exploding to a set, I want to embed static. I go to properties, and then I can actually say how I want it to be displayed. So here I can go color, either original or current. And if I was, say, wanting to bring it in as a grayed out survey, I can say go to color 8. Or no, let's go to color 253 and go color is current, which will make everything come in at the color 253. I can go same with layers. I can override all of the layers to the current layer, or utilise the actual layer numbering and switching that the surveyor has set up. Same with style, same with weights, and the visibility I can set to current or original. So in this case, I would set it to current, which then allows me to go hide and show of my survey however I please, which views I want to do it in, rather than the view of that was set up here. So if I was to bring in the model direct from the import, where it's only got half a dozen views, it hasn't got all the views of this dab, I would actually definitely want to use current, and I would bring it in by insert at a point. In fact, I'll actually bring in the one from the import rather than the one that I set up by views, just to show you what I'm there. Layer surveyor, so I can actually bring in that model view, put it at absolute 0.00, and didn't that show up?
I think your scale thing might have been off in your link scale. Might have been off. I think there was something. Oh no, that's right.
Yeah. I just go show. There you go. It's just in a different position because I hadn't moved it. So move that site next door. It's the right site. Move that to 0.00. Now, because it's linked in, this is before I've exploded. So the override doesn't override the colours of the links within the link. So you'll see they didn't get written to grey. I can go and edit the original, which was just right clicking it and go yes, jumps back to here. I would then probably go link manager, select my trees, change to unpack to set, and change to. That just unpacks all of my trees. Hit save on that, jump back to my working area, update my static link, update static link, and makes them all grey. Now, because it's using the current visibility, it's obviously got the DTM in as well. So I have to use my layer switching to turn that off, which my DTM is on 7 or 8. 8. Brian's changed it on us, as he does. And that gives me a nice little grayed out survey. If I jump to my 1 to 100, it's not there because my visibility is based on my link. So if I want it to show my 1 to 100, I've got to jump in to my 1 to 100 and show. I find it tends to select very easily, which makes working with a static link in place a little bit harder. If you use it as a static link, you can still select, for instance, with the wall offset tool, you can still offset to that line. Like so. If it was a dynamic link, it doesn't actually let you select the lines within the link. It'll automatically update if you do any changes to the parent one, but it won't let you work with it very well at all because you can't pick the lines within it. So that's static link. You can override the colour. You can actually rotate it. You can copy it. You've got a bit more flexibility like that. As a reference, you have a little bit more flexibility with being able to control which views you want to display and don't display in. using of colours independently of each other. That said, I could just say change this link, and instead of using the current colour, use the original colours. So I can go back to my original colours and do it that way. Yeah, that's pretty much the whole of what we do with our survey imports.
Very good.
Yep. So, any questions? Did I confuse you completely?
With your DTM, do you use their, or do you have to ever go back out and take your levels that you need, or do the surveyors always provide the levels for the DTM, and do you modify the DTM?
Yeah. So what I typically do is I find their DTM is usually very complicated, overly complicated for what I need. So if I just jump back in here, turn his DTM back on, you know, it goes halfway up the street. It goes to his, you know, sometimes he shoots off to a point that he's linked into 1 kilometre down the road. It becomes overly complicated. You can actually use his DTM, and you can, even though it's just at the moment a series of triangles, if you want to use his DTM as a DTM that you can actually trim to, all you need to do is cheat. So we go View, Visible Entities, turn on Points. So to create a DTM, of course, you go to Plane, DTM Triangulate, you select a couple of points, and that creates our DTM, which we can actually trim to. That, if we identify it, you'll find that it's just a set called DTM Surf, and its name is Triang. So if you wanted to make his triangles into a DTM that you can trim to, all you need to do is select the triangles that you want to utilise. So in this case, we want to turn off everything except for the DTM, and then go, oh, look, you can pretty much make out the site. You can go, let's just delete everything else out of it. We don't need any of these. And you can then select those. You can create a set. So you just go set, create set name, DTM, what was it called? Surf, S-U-R-F, and it was T-R-I-A-N-G, Triang. Select the triangles. That is now a DTM that you can trim walls to.
And put contour lines on.
And you can put contour lines on it, etc. Of course, he's already put contour lines off the DTM onto my drawing anyway. So that's how he's actually created his contour lines. That said, I flattened his contour lines down flat. So they're no longer on the DTM, they're down flat on the site. Typically what I do is when you end up with a wall that goes over, you know, all these points, and you end up with all this detail on the DTM, the bottom of the wall becomes too complicated to be useful for, you know, if you wanted to just pop it down below the ground or whatever. So I normally do a simplified DTM where I'll just put in half a dozen points around the site and triangulate my own DTM in a more simplified manner. Sometimes when I see things like this with his contour lines, I'll actually stretch that one and just simplify his contours, to make them look a little bit more sensible, or I'll actually use a curve and put in my own curved, not a nerve, I'll put in a B-spline and just use some of these points and create a more sensible contour line through there, and change the style of it to something like that, and then actually just delete his ones out of the way. Yeah, it's a bit of here or there, just what I do to stylize things. One of the surveyors I use puts planes in all of the buildings on the adjoining sites, which looks quite nice. But when it comes to casting shadows, they can cause all sorts of fun and games with shadows coming off those. Again, you just stick them all on a layer and hide them. When it comes to casting shadows, or hide this survey from the view that you're actually doing the shadow casting on, and then select the shadows and then show them on the view that with the survey and your building. There's a couple of ways around it, but the other thing I normally do is I'll actually later in the process re-reference my survey back in and reference it to 15 metres above the buildings or above everything. When it's purely line work, it just means that nothing gets obstructed from the survey because it's well up and above your building. Unless, of course, you wanted your contours to disappear under the building, and then you would just separate those out separately.
Okay.
Does anybody else do anything that's different to what I've done?
Similar.
Okay, I'll show you. I'll import the other one. Where are we? File.
Peter, just a point, when you get a survey from the surveyor,
Yep.
How do you convert it to 2000?
I use DraftSite, which is by Default Industries. Just open it up and go File, Save As, pick from the drop down to the older version and save it. That used to be free. They've taken to charging for it now. Milton's got something that he uses that comes from...
One, isn't it?
Preview.
Preview, yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right.
So, the advantage of DraftSite is that it is actually a full rip-off version of AutoCAD. So if you want to change things around and you can figure out how to use AutoCAD, you can actually do that in there. Rose is better at that than me. Clearly.
Well, I work on AutoCAD 3 days a week, so...
We can feel sorry for you. So if I import that other version here, and we'll just go dunk. I'm just going to go preset all. Do its thing. So I'll show you the macro actually run, and it does most of what I've done tonight in a few seconds. So but obviously you'd have to tweak it to work with whatever your surveyor's particulars are. So what we haven't figured out yet is how to clean up the mess. So I would just go View, Visible Entities, turn them all on, clean up the mess, the stray points. Is that just unique to my surveyor, or does everybody else get that?
Yeah, we all get something there.
That's normal. Right, so there it is. I changed the font to something else, so it actually came in this time. But yeah, the macro, I'll just hit save all, so out of habit, go convert, survey. So converting the trees, turning things on, turning things off, changing its colour, rescaling all the fonts. The only thing it didn't do is it didn't turn the DTM off at the far end.
That's because the DTM's moved to layer 8.
Yeah, and it didn't make my trees green. So I'd just go...
It flattened the DTM.
Yes, it did flatten the DTM because it didn't get turned off before it flattened. Colour, what have we got? Colour 68, okay, and layer mask, please. Select all. There you go. So that's, you probably need to get it to turn the points off at the other end too. There you go. So that's just done everything that I was showing you how to do.
Wow.
Except for referencing it.
Except for the
couple of things.
So there's a couple of few little things that it didn't do. Was it didn't upweight the couple of bits of text and do those fiddle around to scale them away from the building. But everything else was done. It's a bit of a time saver.
How did you instigate that macro? Sorry.
Okay. So I'll show you the macro. There's the macro. And it basically goes step by step through each of the things that we did. And we've labelled it all up. So here's fixing the trees, exploding the trees, turning the DTM off, hopefully, which it didn't do because the surveyor changed which layer the DTM is on, flattening everything, fixing all the text issues with the scaling and drawing things, lots of texty things, changing the dimensions, changing the colours, and making sure that anything that was weighted 0 becomes weight 0.25. And the way we instigated it was I've actually done made it a custom thing where I've just called it Survey Convert Moxon. I've got my little surveyor standing next to the staff, and I just click that and that runs the macro for me. The more manual way to do it would have been File, Run, Macro, find the file, which should be under ArcData. We've stuck it into a library called
Extras.
Extras. Where's Extras? I'm in the wrong spot.
Yeah, you're not in your ArcData.
Yeah. Let's go to let's move. With Rose working remotely, we've got a few things that aren't quite fully connected properly. Where are we? ArcData on Dropbox. ArcData, library, extras, and the macro is called survey. So that's the macro there. I hit open and it will run. The way to actually do that more automated is right-click on this grey section that you find around the edge, go Customize, go to Macros, create a new macro, which we did, called Survey Convert Moxon, and then put in the function, which is explanation macro run execute. Extras is the library where I've got it stashed, and the symbol for the end of the library. So that's just a shortcut of the path, and then the name of the macro file, and then take that and you take him up and you drag and drop him up into the right spot onto your menu.
Hey, Peter, that macro shortcut, is that dedicated strictly for your surveyor?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 90% of the surveys we get are from Brian Moxon. So that's the one that we've written up for Brian surveys. So if I was to do one for Murray Clayton, who's the other surveyor I get a lot of ones from, I have a different tree that I need to substitute in for his because his system uses a different tree. He uses a couple of different layers. So I would just go through that macro and just go, where is it? Notepad.
You can use that. You could use that original one for a template and just change it.
Yeah. So just name. Where is it? No, I must have shut it.
Behind Zoom.
Yeah, Zoom likes hiding things. No, that's not behind Zoom. So file. I'll just reopen it. So what I would do to make one for Brian Moxon is for a different surveyor is I would just go to Dropbox, go to Arc Data, library, extras, go to survey convert. I'd go Control-C, Control-V, and perhaps call this convert Clayton. Open that with Notepad, go through it line by line and go, what bits do I need to change? Okay, his trees aren't on layer 11, his trees are on layer 15. The tree that I want to substitute for is not the Moxon one, it's the Clayton one. And just systematically work through and change the relevant bits and pieces that I need to on the way through. Hit File, Save. Jump back into Caddsman and go either File, Run Macro and select the file, or if I want to actually make it an icon of its own, I would customize, go to Macros, go to Survey Moxon, I select in here, go Control-C while I've got it editing. I would then go New Macro and call up here, rename and call SurveyCvt. Clayton, jump into this bit, jump into that, paste the same line in there, change the name to Clayton, click off, drag it, go convert, drop down to there, right click it, go change icon, pick a different icon. I might go, I like him just standing there without his staff. There you go. And then if I run that macro, I can just click, and then it would run it for the different surveyor.
Yeah, great.
So the reason why I stepped you through each of the steps is obviously to have an understanding of what we're doing, and then when you actually look at your the macro, you'll understand what the hell I'm doing and why I'm doing it. Things like scaling the width of the font, stuff like that I explained on the way through.
Yeah,
On average, how many surveyors would you each use?
Oh, 4 or 5.
I normally only have one. There's one local surveyor.
Yep, that makes life easy.
It does.
If he's consistent, which most of them are. So.
I've got 2, but again, you know, on the odd occasion, clients provide it, so you're always getting a new one in the mix, and that's where that error code comes up. The loading error code 8.
So the loading error code 8. Is that when you've actually got the survey in?
Yeah, and you go to bring it in and it just won't. I think it's because it's a later version or something they use.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, so that's where you just need to convert it to an earlier version of AutoCAD.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, there's a couple of tools for doing that. The other one is when you actually have brought it in and you're zooming in and out, and you get just error after error after error about displaying stuff, and it's normally just that the it's got a degree symbol or something like that. So I'll jump back to. I'll probably be able to show you that. Is it this one that I just ran the macro one? Actually, it was this.
The other one, yeah.
It was the other one, but so if we change, yeah, I'll just close that without saving it. I bring that back in. Was it sample?
Land surveyor.
Yes, can't see it for looking. So if I open that one. Right, so, that's interesting. That's come in with a, that's because I've actually got, I've got the convert table actually bringing things in without special characters already. So I've just got to think about how I change that back to it. There's some way to actually put in the degree symbol.
The little wriggly line next to the 1, that's the one I use.
The wriggly line next to the 1.
On the keyboard, to the left of the number 1.
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
That one?
Shift, is it shift?
That's tilde.
Shift 1. And the one without the shift is that one, which is which is fine. That actually fixes. It doesn't come up with it. So if you change that now to, it's when they're using special characters that are outside the font set of the Caddsman fonts, and you change it over to Caddsman font, is where you end up with having a whole lot of, it just keeps scrolling and scrolling, a whole lot of errors every time you move, that it can't display it. And it's just because of the special character, which that conversion table fixes. But if you miss one, that's what you'll see.
Just paste a quote mark from Word. That'll show them what happens.
A quote mark from Word. Oh yeah, okay, that's right.
Or from an Australian standard, because that's where I usually copy them from.
That's where I find it. A lot of errors come up.
Yeah, so I've just got to move zoom out of the way. So quote. Copy. So if I change, edit and go paste. Right, so it's got no glyph, no glyph. That's what the true type font does with it. But if you change that to a Caddsman font, like ISO, then you'll have down here error occurred with string question mark, hello question mark, and every time you move it flickers and flickers and carries on. So if that was the case, once you track down which piece of text it is, you can edit and you can actually then highlight that, copy it, and go off, find the Unicode for it and put it into the convert, the CVT file, and actually have it automatically fix it every time. So this particular one, I can go that, I can come and go Unicode V, and it should come up with, there you go, that's the Unicode there.
How the hell did you find all this stuff out?
Yeah, I'll say.
I must have a boring life or something, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, Unicode has like zillions of different things. So you can even have a Unicode for a smiley face if your surveyor's in a really happy mood. So yeah, you jump into where was it? It's back in
Data.
Yeah, back in Arc Data. So it's
Just go back.
Arc Data.
You're in extras, so just go back to
Arc Data. Yeah, character map, and then I can just put in a slash paste tab
Is that what they come from?
and replace it with that. And so when that then comes in from my DWG file, it will put in the right, our character map version of it, and be happy.
Mm.
and it'll only complain about the character if the character or if the piece of text the character is on the screen, won't it?
Yes. So you can track it down by zooming around, and all of a sudden it comes into screen. So this one, for instance, is complaining like crazy over here. But as soon as I get it out of view, it stopped complaining. Yeah. So you go start, and it's complaining every time you zoom, and then you work your way in. You work your way in. Stop complaining. It's not over here. It started complaining again. It's somewhere here. And you can zoom your way in and find the offending piece of text, and work your way out from there. Or ask your surveyor to stop using special characters. Yeah, and if you use true type fonts, so for instance, if you are bringing in, say, some text from an Australian standard and you want to put it in as a note, if you use a true type font for that, that'll overcome some of those special characters. As you saw, it depends on which font. Arial's really good. It will have, so this one that was offending before, lost him, edit. So if I paste that back to Word, copy, if I paste my hello in here, and it doesn't know what to do, if I used instead of Nuto, so even true type fonts have this same problem in that whoever's making the font has to make a character for every single character. It becomes a some of the more specialised fonts, they don't bother doing that for every character. So there you go. It didn't even come in correctly from Arial. You can see it. It's there, but it's not there. So I don't know. I don't have any special tools for stripping out special characters in off your clipboard. I don't know whether you guys all on Windows 10?
Yeah. Yes.
really cool little one that I've found on Windows 10, something new that they've introduced, is if you use the Windows paste button, instead of Control V, you use Windows V. You can, so let's say I'm in Edit and I use Windows V, it actually has a multi-stacked or multi-page clipboard. So you can go back to something that you put on the clipboard earlier.
Oh, right.
The first time you use it, I'm pretty sure you have to turn it on. So
Yes. Yeah, the first time you use Control V, it will say
Windows V.
Windows clipboard's not turned on. Would you like me to turn it on? And you say yes, and then it will just use that multi-paged one instead of the as well as your single one. So Windows V for paste instead of Control V. And that's great for if you're on an elevation, you've got 6 different notes that you want to put on a couple of different elevations or over your drawings in different spots. You just copy them all to your clipboard, jump to the different view, and then you Windows V and paste it. And yeah, you've got a bit of a selection there to paste from.
Good.
Also good for when you're doing your emails and you've got to get, the planning application number and the planner's name and the address of the job. And you can just clip them all to this clipboard, jump across to email and go Control V and pick off the different bits that you need.
Good tip.
So, yeah, I'm loving that one. And the other one that's quite useful is Windows have introduced Snap and Sketch. Snap and Sketch, which is a Snip and Sketch. There you go. Allows you to actually do snapshots of your screen and mark them up and pop them on the clipboard and paste them into an email. So if you go new, shades out your screen, you can highlight the area, pops it in here. You can use the highlighter tool, highlight something up, go copy it to the clipboard, jump over to your email and paste it into your email.
Does it send it as a PDF or a JPEG?
It's just a JPEG or
I've got one called Snipping Tool.
Snipping tool, yep.
Very similar, yeah.
This is its successor.
Okay.
There you go. You can actually save it out as a JPEG, GIF or PNG. Yeah, this is an updated version that's in Windows 10.
Snipping Sketch.
The only thing it doesn't have is it's got no ability to put text on. It's just a little annoying when you want to put a big circle around it and say, this here.
Yeah.
You've got to write it out rather than there's no text tool up the top here. And you can recrop your image if you decided you don't like the original crop. You can actually even go change its mode. You can actually snip out something like that. You can snip a whole window, but the rectangle one's the one I mainly use.
Not bad for free of charge, is it?
Yeah, well, I don't know whether it's free of charge. It's Windows. You pay for it somewhere through the nose.
Where did you find Snip and Sketch, sorry?
Yeah.
In Windows.
Yeah. How do you feel? What's the command for it?
It is Windows Shift S.
Windows.
That gives you sort of an in brief version of it, or you just go to your start bar and type snip, and it'll come up with snipping tool and snip and sketch as 2 different things. That's snip and sketch. Snipping tool is the old version. So snipping tool looks more like that. And it doesn't have the markup side of things. And I think you've also, it doesn't automatically put it on the clipboard, and there's a few other nice little things. Anybody got other tips that they'd share? Whether we stay focused on the survey imports and what you do with your surveys, or you got other businessy things that you...
Well, that's enough for me for one night.
You've got
My
none.
brain won't hold too much more.
I'll have to watch this one of ours.
Yeah.
Yeah. Once you've actually got the macro and you just go down through the macro, because we've actually written it out, it's got step-by-step how going through it manually anyway if you just follow down the headings, or run, vary the macro and run it and see whether you can get it working.
Sorry, Peter, with that macro, so we just copy that macro and we put it into basically that macro that you sent us. We just copy that macro and then we put it into where, sorry?
Anywhere you like, but you can either put, an easy way would be if you use ArcData, I would probably suggest going C:, ArcData, maybe create a new folder called macros.
Right, okay.
If you do that and then chuck it into that, then when you want to actually make your own customized command for it, you would go to macros, and then you would, instead of going extras in here, you would write out whatever the path is.
Right.
So in that case, C, architect data, macros, and then the name of the macro.
Right. Yep.
Right. And
that's
to make life even easier for you, if you actually find it and go, where was it? C:, ArcData, macros, and let's say the file's there. In Windows, if you come up the top here and you right click, you can go copy address as text. And that will actually copy the path.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So when you come back in here, you can actually go, where is he? I'll just do a new one. So you would actually go in here, you'd go Windows, you double click in your macro string, and you would go macro run execute V, there's your path, and you slash and you write the macro name .mac.
Right. Unbelievable.
And name it whatever you like to name it. And drag him and drop him up onto one of your bars up the top here. Of your icon menus.
How the hell did you find all that out? That's all I want to know. No, I don't.
No.
They make us look simple, don't they, Graham?
It's not that complicated. It really isn't. So,
when you select the macro by default, Pete, what folder does it go to?
sorry, what was that?
When you go to File, Run Macro,
Oh, yeah.
which folder does it go to?
Straight into ArcData.
Okay, so my suggestion would be, for simplicity initially,
Just chuck it straight in there.
chuck it straight in. You're not going to have to look for it.
Yeah, right.
The other thing I was going to say, given that you've got the template that the Moxon template that Peter uses, have a crack at modifying it for one of your surveyors, because there's nothing that substitutes for trying it yourself. And once you've tried it, if you then still find you've got issues with it, shoot it through and we can have a look at it for you. But once you've done one, and I know this sounds awfully simple, but I think Peter will agree, once you've done one, you've got your head around it, they're actually not that complex.
Very easy to just spot, oh, that's where it talks about the layer number, and my trees are on layer number whatever, or my text is, you know, I want to use a different font or whatever. I just change the font name there and to match the font name that I want. They are really quite simple.
To you.
Oh, come on.
So that's what we're saying, Graham. Have a crack at it.
Yeah.
And then if it doesn't look like it's doing something correctly, shoot it through to us and we'll have a look at it for you.
Even if you delete a lot of the stuff out of the macro and just work on your text and then do that macro with just altering the text.
Yeah. So what we did is to actually get the macro working right through is I've got this little icon here that just says test, and so I start with a macro called test and just put in one lot of functions.
Yep.
And then I hit run test and try it out. Okay, that bit's working. Okay, chuck that into the main run of things, and then do the next one.
Yeah, it's basically programming,
Yeah, and you just get one little routine working, and then you add it to the big list. So
there is within the macro, Pete. How is it? What character do you put in front of a line to ignore it? Can you remember?
Hash.
The hash.
Yeah.
So actually, in the same, if you look at Pete's macro where he's got hash fixed trees, hash explode trees to sets, you could go through the macro and essentially put a hash in front of everything that you're not sure of.
Oh, yeah.
And leave it there, but then go back to it later if you need it without deleting it, as Graham just suggested.
So,
does that sort of make sense?
Yes, it does.
You're right, yeah.
I find that whenever I change something like a macro, if I take everything out and start again, I get lost. Whereas if I leave everything there as a template and obscure it by putting the hash in front of it, then I can sequentially add it in as I need it.
Yeah.
Does anyone not have True View?
Yes.
Do you want to shoot anyone that doesn't have it? Can you shoot me an email tonight or tomorrow, and I'll shoot you a link to TrueView. And TrueView is a really simple. You've literally got, I think it's 2 steps, and the major step is just setting up a path where you want it to write the file to, and you just hit convert, and it just goes through and says which file do you want me to convert. You select it, and bang, it's done. And the only reason I'm asking you to shoot me an email is otherwise I won't remember by the morning. I defrag overnight, so in the morning I've forgotten everything.
So any line here that starts with a hash is just a comment line. So here, turn on all entities. And then command just says, put this on the command line, which is down here. And it says, viz entity, all points, yes, 3 points, yes, okay. So if I actually take that line and go copy and come down into the command line and go paste, enter, it actually runs that function just as it does from the macro.
Yeah.
So yeah, as I said, layer mask 11. Well, that's selecting anything that's on layer 11. So you want to change it, 12, 13, whatever. It's easy.
Rightio.
Abort is like saying okay. Explode all links. On the command line, it's going to put in the function link explode. Then on the command line, it's going to put inline select all. And then it goes okay. And so that explodes all the links that are in the drawing. Turn off the DTM. Okay, layer mask off, layer 8, abort. So if your DTM is on layer 26, just change that to 26 and it will turn your DTM off.
Okay. Yep.
This one, you know how we said flatten?
Yep.
Was using the scale. So it just puts on the command line the function scale, and then it sets the X scale to 1, the Y scale to 1, the Z scale to 0, number of copies to 0, and then it hits OK.
Everything gets
Goes in line, select everything.
So what's the difference between OK and abort?
Not quite sure.
If there's a button that says OK on the prompt, use OK. If you usually need to right click, then you should use abort.
Right, okay.
That's the general rule. If you're doing text editing and you're putting in some text, you need to press abort at the end. Because if you put OK, it will just put it at the end of the text.
Right, yeah, that makes sense.
And the other thing that Pete touched on when he first started to bring it in, by default, we set under advanced, under the DWG import, we set blank text to be off, and there's a reason for that. AutoCAD has a habit of allowing them to create a piece of text that's actually got nothing in it, and we can't cope with nothing. So essentially, that just leaves out anything. If it's blank text, it's useless. It's just something they put in there and they didn't delete it. And it's occupying space and it's screwing up something somewhere. So by default, always leave that switch to don't import, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
Go down to advanced.
Advanced, and down here, exclude blank text.
Yep.
So I actually don't know why you'd bother having that as a function, giving the user the option to say don't.
Right.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I don't remember. It was so long ago.
Yeah. So
Now, the other thing that I might have missed, what have you got set there in terms of scale, etc., and meters? And you're bringing in model space. Do you generally bring them in meters or?
absolutely, yeah. Surveyors usually work with meters. And if you bring it in as millimeters, then you've got to scale everything 1,000 times up, which is what used to have to happen before that was introduced. So that's really useful, that one.
So you run that macro after you've imported
so I import it.
DWG.
Yep, so I go import like this, and I'm just going to override what was imported. I just go preset all, thinks it through. Still thinking it through.
Is that a feature you put in, Milton? Non-responding?
Sorry, which one?
That one there.
No.
The non-responding.
No, that's just telling you that Windows is struggling with how much work we're doing.
Yeah, that's right. Good comeback, mate. Good comeback.
So yeah. So in she comes. So this is, this is the one where I'd actually substituted the font. So I just go up here, convert, Moxon. It runs through, changes the trees, changes this, changes the scales, the fonts, the colours, and forgets to turn off the DTM and forgets to change the visible entities back to that.
Probably want to delete those stray points before you do that.
Yeah. So it's nice to see them for when you want to clean them up. So yeah, and that changes the setbacks to the way I want want them and everything. So
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah.
So yeah, if we turn the visible entities back on, what it hasn't done is it hasn't picked up all those stray points. So the delete, get rid of that stuff up there, and delete, get rid of that stuff there, and delete, clean that up, clean that up.
But you don't want a macro doing, because then it'll just delete all the stray points, regardless of if you want them or not.
For some reason, that tree's got a stray point way out over here, so yeah, you do need to sometimes be careful what you're cleaning up once you're getting in closer to your work. Ah, that's true too. And then,
Very good.
boom.